we're going to be looking at what's new in 2020. And specifically, this is me. I'm based out of Raleigh, North Carolina. I've been doing this for almost 17 years now on the reseller side. I very much enjoy AutoCAD, MAP, and the InfraWorks software, and specialize on the customization and custom training of the Autodesk line of platforms on the civil side. Really, we're going to be looking at InfraWorks on this incredibly management package here, and how really we're going to be modeling. And although there's many presentations out there, I'm not going to focus on all the tools that InfraWorks have. Really, I'm going to hit on the highlight and the new items within the software. But if you're interested in digging into and getting trained on how to use or how to better use a portion of the software, we can definitely help you out. There's a lot that has happened with InfraWorks. It used to be on a quarterly release cycle, and as of right now, as of January, it's on the 2020.2. So I've seen several releases of the software and updates, and even in between, you may download it today and you may download it tomorrow. It might be different, but there are several big pieces to InfraWorks, and pretty much the biggest change to InfraWorks is the interface. Even if you installed earlier versions of the release 2020, 2020.1 was exactly the same, and 2020.2, the whole interface changed, and that's what really we're going to be talking about today as part of what we're going to be working with. Anything from building a model, that has changed slightly, it has been enhanced, to the user interface itself. It's now more ribbon-based, where before was just buttons across the top. So really implementing the overall look of ribbons is what this Autodesk platform really took over here. So if you have been using InfraWorks before, it might take you a little bit of time to get used to the interface and trying to figure out where the buttons are, but it's still a really great, friendly piece of software. You just need to figure out where they move the button to. One of the biggest pieces to pretty much our side of the industry is using the Autodesk GIS connector, and that is either to pull and push data, which is a big part of being able to leverage ArcGIS information. And if you're not really connecting to an actual geodatabase, then it may not be as important to you, but we're still able to leverage shape files as we used to before, but now we can connect to those portals and that online data, and not only consume, but able to write out with intelligent object data as well. That's a big update for this release. I'm going to blow through a couple of these slides here, just showing off the big items here. The Autodesk connector, being able to push more data and being able to do it more effectively. Working with civil objects, the big part is being able to look at bridge bearings that has been added in. We've had parametric data for a while now, but this is really the big add-on. Now, along with this, many of the updates to InfraWorks in this latest release is the interoperability and to the smoother transition to deal with InfraWorks to Civil, from InfraWorks to Revit, or from InfraWorks to Inventor. So speaking to the other platforms, that has been really refined in the background, something you're not going to be able to just see a button for. Collaboration and dealing with BIM 360. InfraWorks used to work with Autodesk 360, and we were able to share models up there. Now we really depend on the BIM 360 service to be able to share models, very similar to what we're able to do with the Civil 3D side of the business. Again, an update to InfraWorks and an update onto how Civil exchanges data. Again, just a lot of that in the background, and really being able to keep a tie-in to other files and other design modules other than InfraWorks himself. Just generically, I like that we're now working with georeferencing, and that has historically been defaulting to the LL84. And now as we create a model, we have an option to set it something else right at the beginning. Shortcuts have been changed or removed. And one of the odd things here is as well with the InfraWorks licensing, it used to be a user-based product. Now it can be managed as a multi-user licensing or network licensing, a little bit different, kind of going back to how it used to be. Dealing with terrain is a little bit different as well. Choosing how to generate and how to show the terrain, that new feature there is really neat for being able to run a little bit quicker, especially when you're looking at very large areas. Roadway design, they have been added a couple little things inside of here. I think the most you're going to like is in the profiles and cross sections, some cool little features that have been added there. And I'll go ahead and speak about those. Really the ability of looking at station elevations and looking at terrain and tracking that from the profiles and cross sections. Being able to push and pull schemas from ArcGIS is great, but really getting to what you're going to be perhaps doing a little bit more of is just dealing with surface layers. Not only being able to see them, but at times, one of my biggest things that I had in the past was I used to create surfaces, whether it was coming from a point cloud or was connecting to data. Many times I would connect to it, I would see it, it would be categorized and defined correctly, but the surface itself was quote unquote still uncategorized. And it took me a while to figure out where that was at. And now you're going to get a prompt for it. So we can make sure that the surface that we are actually connecting to are being consumed by the software. And I'll show that off where it's at, but it really requires a connection, which is typically dealing with talking to files, for example, land XML. Traffic simulation, I'm not going to get a chance to give you the bits and pieces of traffic simulation, what do you have to feed it, but the cool update in this release is being able to tackle a roundabout where the car now or the people can actually go around the roundabout. Visualization in general is being able to check the performance and the frame rate of our tool sets here. There's a little drop down button for that now so you can see what's going on. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to go ahead and jump in directly into InfraWorks. So hopefully here with that quick chat about how that all worked out, I'm going to go ahead and open up an InfraWorks model here, and I will start with the Home tab. So it looks a lot like it used to before. A little bit darker, a little gray scheme here. And the first thing I want to talk about is Model Builder. It looks almost identical as it did before. They changed where the buttons are located, but the idea is still the same. In this case, if you are part of the BIM 360 service, as you create and download a model, you're going to get the option to, as you request a service for a model, when you get the models up in these little tiles here, you will get the option to sync it to the BIM 360 service. Of course, you have to have the service active, you have to have a project active, and you have to have it readily available and assigned to you. So there's a lot of checkboxes that need to happen in the background, but once you get those all lined up, you should be able to create models on the BIM 360 service and share them. So that's one of the little differences that has happened in this year release. Also, what I like now is the use of my application button over here. I used to have to hunt for it, but now when I pick on it, I can get directly into my application options. And a couple things that I like to do inside of here is being able to go into and change the way that my units are configured. I can set them to directly to Imperial, so I don't have to have a model open. 3D graphics, just how I want to move. And over here for the user interface, this is neat. So if you've been tinkering with your settings, I like the fact that I can go back and quickly restore those settings back to default if things are just not looking and behaving correctly, or if you've been tinkering with too many settings. I like that right there. Also, the fact that if you want to know which release of InfraWorks you're on, being able to go here to the About tab. And this is going to be important throughout the office because you want to make sure that if you are sharing models, whether it's on BIM 360 or on a local network, your team should be on the same exact release or version of InfraWorks. Because if there's only one person who has a newer version of InfraWorks, whenever they touch and open that model, it will update it, or it'll give you an option to update it or create a copy and update it. But everybody else is going to be locked onto it, locked away from it, because that model is now on the newer version of InfraWorks. Kind of what happens inside of AutoCAD when there's a new release that it has a new .dwg format. That's what happens inside of here. Although we're dealing with database in the background, and they did change the way that we're using databases in the background now. There used to be one version of SQLite, now it's in a different version of SQLite. So they did improve quite a bit on the back end of the database itself. Go here and open up one of my projects here. And the first thing I want to show off here is, man, this just looks quite a bit different than in earlier releases. Now, as you start working with InfraWorks, I want to go ahead and mention that whenever you're working with InfraWorks, that big eye on the upper left-hand corner is what allows you to minimize your models. That model is still technically open. When I pick on it, it loads up really, really quickly. So that little eye is there's like minimizing your model. If you ever go over here and pick on a new model, it closes the old one and opens up the next one. So just be aware that that button right there helps you minimize models and being able to see what you need here. So I'm just going to run across the top here because it's so different, it has that different feel to it. Where in the past we were dealing with those little circles over here the orange button and the roadway button and the utility button and the bridge button and the settings button, and I think I'm missing one more. Settings and utilities, settings and animations. So it's the same thing, but a little bit different. What we have here is the ability of looking at my models, whether it's my model properties. I have this option over here. I like being able to get into my model properties because I can set, yes, my coordinate system, set extents, or this is something that's new, being able to look at my terrain and setting my terrain to be generating for speed or for position. So I can have that be changed for me. I do believe in this year release, did they not load up the 2019? I don't have the 2018 Astro Table add-ons. Civil 3D does have it running for the 2018 Astro Tables that they haven't piped them over to InfraWorks quite yet. So we have these settings available here. Again, looking from the left to right here, Manage Tab Model, I see all my settings over here. Being able to look at my Model Explorer and see what I have currently running here for me. Being able to see my proposals and popping those open. All these little panels that open up here for my side. One thing that I find interesting is I only have the 3 buttons inside of here, and those are the ones that I see up top. But when I start looking at other panels where I have more than just the 3 spaces, I think it's interesting that whenever you pick on any one of these other buttons on the right-hand side here, have the ability of popping them in and pinning it to the bar up there. So you'll notice how that happens to pop up there on screen. It will change the order. I have no way of locking it down. It just kind of goes ring around the rosies there and pops a new element up there. Data sources, what you're used to seeing from that from previous versions. So I do have all my data sources readily available here. Being able to look at my style palettes, being able to look at directly to the drainage parts editor, or if you have the functionality to go directly out there into the world and connect to the ArcGIS, and depending to which services online you have available, again, there are sometimes state or local or county resources. Sometimes there's some government agencies that have those web versions available where you're going to have an ID and a login and a password, or sometimes universities have free access to data. So that's the newer portion of being able to access data, what might be available for you, which I think it's really neat. And the beauty of pulling data from this ArcGIS connector is not having to define it and being able to go back and update it and not having to deal with a point file. We're still able to deal with shape files. This is just a little bit different, a little bit way of addressing and pulling data from a GIS database, not just a point file. Because yes, we still have the ability of pulling in shape files from the list here. So I do have still that option to pull a shape. Being able to look at my display, the sun and sky and the time that I want to set there, being able to look at my surface layers. And this is the part that I wanted to talk about. So many times I've had created surfaces and brought them in, and I know that they're good. They came in from Civil, they came in from another design platform. And what happens is over here, they end up being uncategorized. So if you ever see a surface that's being uncategorized, let me just take this guy and drag and drop it up there. You'll be able to then take it and drag and drop it and change its location on here. So please note how that works out for you. Also, as you drag and drop layers inside of here, the order that they're stacked is gonna really control who wins. And quite separately to that is the fact that InfraWorks, and this has worked the same way for a while, it's been here. Every time you add a surface, it's going to try to blend your surfaces. So if you have an existing and a proposed, it tries to blend them when you put them in the same exact category. However, if you create a brand new layer here, see that little new layer button? This was added a few releases ago. It can allow you to bring in another surface and not have them blend into each other. So I would have existing and I would have proposed right on top of each other. Or if I have alternates or have different days that I want to show off, please be aware that that's what that new surface layer allows me to do. If they're all collected in the same list, they're going to blend into each other. Kind of like what happens inside of Civil when you start pasting surfaces. So that's what I wanted to show off here in the surface layers, was one of those notes that I wanted to talk about. All right, let's see here. That was surface layers, theming the terrains. So those are your themes for your terrain. Same, just the word to find the button. Now, point clouds, this has been updated year after year. And the fact that, yeah, not only able to bring in a point cloud, and I don't have a point cloud to be able to show off right now, but the fact that I can start extracting linear or vertical features or start popping images based upon a particular point cloud. Now, it depends on the density and how it was scanned, of course, and how dense that point cloud is on how accurate it's going to create these surfaces. But this is how I'm able to leverage point cloud and start extracting geometry. Also want to bring a point cloud inside of Civil 3D. As of a few releases ago, I'm able to do analysis of that terrain, of that scan, to be able to classify and pull terrains. So the workflow really here, and the reasons that we have a suite, if you have a point cloud scan that you want to take, for example, into Civil 3D to create a terrain, there's a whole workflow for that. You would bring it in and process it through Recap, take that scan, which is then a point cloud, bring it into InfraWorks, clean it up to be able to really find the terrain, and then kick it out to Civil 3D. Shoot, as you kick it out into Civil 3D, you can even have it already try to extract line work if that point cloud was finite enough to be able to pull things like edge of pavement, backup curves, or building outlines. It's an incredible, powerful piece of the software, and that function has been there for a while. I just want to show it off where it is on the ribbon. Working from the ribbon here, I do have a couple of things I want to talk about. The fact that I'm able to view and display my profile view, which is pretty simple. It's a single item inside of here. I would definitely have keep an eye on this, as it may add a little bit more. I would assume that the section views would be in here as well, but it's not showing sections, so okay. I have the option of selecting, so that used to be a little button in a previous release. And I have the ability of looking at just kind of the analysis or measuring, which I don't mind too much. But here's my little crescent wrench and screwdriver where I start looking at what I used to see before. Again, the application option, which I showed you a little bit ago, and it shows it up here, and being able to look at more specifically running a performance check and looking at my frame rate, which you can see right now the frame rate is about a 2 or 2.6 or 3 frames per second up there. But if I look at my performance check over here, it's going to actually analyze my model and give me a little, I shouldn't have picked on that, give me a little input on what's going on. So there's that. And then, of course, my bookmarks. As I go on over to the right here, I have my proposals and the way that I'm viewing my terrain. And of course, the settings inside of here. The little sprocket there gives me my settings. More specifically, being able to see how I'm able to zoom to a selection, keep my mouse above ground, show my tooltips. Under V for visualization over here, if I switch it on over, changing my color scheme, my surface opacity, animations and wireframes. Of course, everything is set to be pretty high because I'm set to conceptual view. If I switch this to engineering, you can see how it changes not only the view on the screen, but these settings as well. So these settings over here get remembered by whatever view you have set up. And of course, my terrain, being able to show off the use of contours. So none of this has really changed. I just want to show off where those tools are at. Every once in a while, they will add or move tools, so just be aware of where that button is at. So this is the new location of where I have all these settings located. All right, so there's blah, 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 that. Okay, cool. So onto this, I have the option to create. So I used to have the option to create like generic objects and then transportation, structures, and drainage. But now it's a little bit different. I now have transportation as one big button over here, and it tries to associate several of these objects together. Having my planning roads or my sketched roads, the ones that download from the model, would be a planning road, and of course a component road. Being able to then look at structures, whether it's bridge, tunnel, or notice building, or generic objects. Construction equipment, signs, and retaining walls, which I used to see those as just generic objects, as being able to look at really what was city furniture. So the city furniture used to include generic objects, so just be aware of where it's at now. And of course, drainage. Now, under environment, yes, I have my city furniture. I then have the coverages, the land area, and being able to look at the rest of those functions available in here. When you activate city furniture, as an example, it does give me a slightly different panel, but the idea is still the same. If I look for a car in here, I like that I'm able to filter down to whatever I'm looking for. So just be aware that it's a little bit different, but it's pretty much the same. Over here on the Analyze tab, I do like the fact that I can run some analysis on, for example, transportation, and it's all available in here. None of that has really changed. Being able to run analysis on bridges, or being able to analyze drainage I like it all here, but one of the things that did change was looking at my traffic here, and I think I did have a traffic proposal to show you how this new function was added, so I can start looking at traffic simulation. And now for cul-de-sacs have been already given here, and I already ran the design itself. So what you'll be able to see here is cars actually running through the cul-de-sac, which they only used to run through intersections. So that's one of the updates that has happened this year release. I didn't give it too much data in the background. I just have it the standard locations where cars are coming in and out. I just gave it something really raw just to see the function happening here. There's so much more that I can do with these traffic studies because I can run analysis not only for transportation, but also for mobility. So I can look at how crowds would move, and InfraWorks could analyze this for me. It's based upon a very similar technology. Presenting and sharing, this doesn't change too much as far as being able to really create storyboards or screenshots here. It's an option for me to be able to kick that out. That hasn't really changed. It's just where it's located. What has been added into this year release is, again, to be able to publish out to ArcGIS. And again, based upon your login and who you're connecting to, I'm able to, yes, choose what I want to kick out. I'm going to just use the entire model. And what has happened in this year release, I have the ability of choosing how much data goes out with it. So if I'm still choosing to not show too much information or too much data because I'm still running a preliminary analysis, or I'm just doing what if scenarios, I have now the ability of pushing this out, where before I only had the ability of reading or consuming GIS data. So be aware that that exists out there. And that was really quickly just showing you just the overall view of the software on how when you get in here, it might look a little bit different for you. And don't take it too much of a shock. It'll take you a minute to get used to it. But if you've been using InfraWorks before or been using Autodesk software in the past, you know how much of a shell shock it was when we went to the ribbon. And that's basically what's happening here. We're now using the ribbon in this year release. So that was really quick because I just wanted to save some time to start getting into some of the toys and some of the tools that we have inside of here to do a little bit more work. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that I really showed really quickly inside of the PowerPoint presentation. And let me start looking here from the top down. All right, being able to work with GIS, that's fine. I already kind of showed that. The bridges and structures and abutments. Now, things have been getting more and more parametric throughout each year release. And what I want to show off here is working with bridges. Now, if you've worked with InfraWorks before, it's all about a slow double pick. So my first pick here gives me my entire design, my roadway, which includes my bridge. And as I start selecting on the elements, there's my pavement section. And as I start looking at this information, it all highlights it. So be aware as you're selecting your design, it can show more information or more data based upon your selection. In this case, I'm looking at my bridge over here, well, my road and my bridge, and my other road on the side here, which are all component roads. And you can see immediately how labels pop in for me. A new update for what is a component road is being able to see my stationing up here. Now, the one thing I haven't been able to do quite yet, and man, I was hoping they would do it, is having them allow me to change that start station instead of starting at 0, 0, and I can't. So now I see that station actually labeled up here on my design. As far as seeing more information on the screen, it's also very select right-click oriented. What I want to show is here showing the actual design speed. Notice how it says there at 24.85 miles per hour. So that design is being shown off on the screen there for me as far as the roadway goes. So be aware how your selections end up working out. So in this case, I have my bridge as well here, and I want to start talking a little bit more about it because with the select right-click option, what I want to show off for this particular bridge is being able to show or hide features. Please note how I selected the bridge and it kind of disappeared on me. That's because I've been playing with it already. And that is if I select the bridge and right-click, I have the option of displaying components for it. It recognizes the road as one component because if you've been working with bridges before, you first have to have a design road or a component road to then add a bridge to it. You can't just design a bridge. You have to have a road and then add a bridge to it. And please note how I chose to turn off features of it. So there's my road and there's the deck. and I can start looking at the piers and the foundations and start enabling disabling objects so I can see more objects inside of here. So as you start looking at my design here, because I now see through the bridge, I have the ability of selecting those items. In this case, you can see the girder and the type of girder that I'm using here and its features. Now I have the ability of switching out to different types of elements inside of here. And that's why it's so important to be able to select, right-click, and choose to show or hide components. So be aware of where you're at and how that all highlights for you. As I move around, see, there's the road and there's the bridge. Once I select the bridge, boom, things automatically start popping for me based upon my component display. What I wanted to draw your attention to in this year release is my bearings. These can be designed inside of a mechanical package and brought into InfraWorks as parametric parts. Now, there are a couple of them already preloaded, and I can switch out to any one of these or design them and bring them in. And of course, I have the asset card here giving me all the properties for this particular element. And the fact that they're parametric parts and I'm calling each individual piece can help me later on to do cost estimation. I can create proposals with trying to remove or add girders or trying to add or remove the shape of my designs to see what the software tries to tally this up for. So I like that this has been newly added to the software, this parametric part. And along with my bridge, something else that has been enhanced in an earlier release of the software are my abutments themselves. And I have really cool looking abutments. So if I look at the design that I'm using here, that's the assembly for my bridge. There's the beam. Nope, I want to look at the abutment itself. Let me pick on it. Here it is. So I have different parametric parts that I'm able to use. Again, these can be modeled and brought in as well, whether I want what's readily available here. One thing I have not been able to do with the abutments is actually have wing walls that angle out. I wish to see that here in the near future, but they're pretty much just kind of 90 degrees into my design. I haven't been able really to play with the angles of the wings themselves, at least not as of yet, or the last time I checked. So just be aware that's one of those add-ons that was brought into the software to have parts be a little bit more parametric. Along with this for my roadway, let's see if I can hit escape here. Just because I have it up here, I'll go ahead and talk about it. My roads now, as far as the cut and fills here, I can now apply a certain material to my cut and fills. So in this case, I just went red and green, but it's pretty much all green as far as showing off fill here. That's something new that I can do from within the software. Of course, first I have to calculate cut and fill to be able to make this outwork correctly, but those are my grading areas showing my cut and fill in my design. Let's see what else I have here. Now, because I am building bridges, if I end up taking this design directly into Revit, we'll be able to see this information inside of Revit as a building structure. Because it is a component road, what I'll also be able to do is see this inside of Civil 3D as typical cross sections, because it will build a corridor and it will build assemblies. All right, all this can be brought in and taken out and into more of a shared environment, but you need to make sure you're using your models with sharing your models with BIM 360. And this is just the service that allows me to share my models. And in this case, I'm just going to push the button here to choose how much or what I want to share within my hub here. So pretty much you can see how I have a project created. It's just a little testing project that I created out there. So I can take my model and share it. And this is the method of creating a shared environment, especially when it's not in Office. I'm not using here in this particular case any of resources from my server to be able to share and store this model. Otherwise, you won't be able to really share comments and share the model or publish the model, have it be shown externally. So it is a way of working with the software. Also with BIM 360, you're able to share your models with people outside of your firm without having them to come through your server, your service, your firewall. You're sharing it safely outside of your firm, and it'll be a live model. So that has been greatly improved in this year release. If you're not using it, then you're not really going to see much of a of a spike in performance there, but that has been better and better throughout the year releases to be able to do that, support the smooth sharing of data. All right. Sharing data within Civil 3D to InfraWorks or from InfraWorks into Revit has also been improved. All that really is done in the background. Let's see here. Licensing change, the application button change, and as well the way that it defaults to the LL84. When you create a model from scratch, it'll give you the option to change it. Let's see here. Roadway. Roadway is neat. So let's take a little bit more look at the roadway. I'm going to step away from the bridge over here just to see a couple of the updates that I've had for the roadway. Now for roadway over here, it's very select right-click oriented, and you've seen how this has grown throughout the past few releases on what we're able to do with my roadway. Notice I can easily go start adding bridges and tunnels instead of having to go to the ribbon or fish or find for a button, add assemblies or add decorations or add components. But what I want to show here is the fact that I'm able to show off my profile. When I start looking at my profile here, what I'm also going to be able to do is start seeing where I'm physically at as I start selecting my design here, being able to highlight those locations so I see everything all at once. Now, a couple things that have been added in this year release is as I start moving around, I also want to show off, come on, give me my cross sections. And this is where really things starting to shine when I start seeing plan profile and my sections. Come on, buddy. There's a section. Let's go here to the option to do this right here. Right click and show in canvas. Boom. It takes me right to where I'm looking at. So a lot of times I had a problem showing, gosh, what station is this? Station 5. And if I have a really long alignment, I don't see it. But if I right click here, I have the option to show in canvas, and it takes me directly to that station. So I can see exactly where I'm at in my design. Also from here to right click and show in section view. And the really cool part here is please note how that section at station 545 is being highlighted in my plan, and it's been highlighted in my profile view. Very similar to what I can do inside of Civil 3D. Just these little things that I'm able to do here. Along with that, please note the line here is showing me the elevation as I'm moving around. Now, something that I've also been waiting is the fact that I can do active tracking. So as I show this off here, let me see if I can take my cross section and take this out. As I move around, look at this right here. I've been waiting for this for a long time. This little active tracking button right there, it's money. Of course, I can go through my section here and start going up station, down station if I wanted to. Based upon my profile here, I have had times where I need to look at my design and I forget to enable or disable the view of my existing terrain. So I start zooming in and out. I have times where I forget to show off my existing terrain in my profile view. And in this year release, talking about updates, my cross section here has the option of showing my surface layers when I'm looking at my cross section here. So there's my road cross section, and now I have the ability of showing that existing terrain if I wanted to. So I think it's neat that they added that release. Now it depends on which view you're looking at. That is the section itself, and that's cut and fill. Over here for the super elevation view, I have the option to showing that surface layer, which I think it's really neat. So those are just these little updates that make my life a little bit easier and looking at design in context and being really able to feel what's going on a lot quicker. And of course, cross sections and profiles have been available for a while, but just that fact that I'm seeing all this information, and of course, the fact that I'm seeing this information is partly due to, yes, this being a design road, yes, me allowing me to see this information on the screen, but along with that is because when I select it, I see these labels has to do a lot with how I have my software set up. Let me go over here and choose my views. I have the choice of showing labels. As I run my selections, there's feedback and canvas labels. Boom, labels, no labels, labels, no labels. So be aware that a lot of this intelligence and a lot of these elements that we're seeing on the screen has to do with how I set my visual settings. All right, let's see what else we have going on over here. Roadway continue profile views. I already showed that. The ability to show my cross sections and my range of stations. You already see the range of stations in your design over here. Let me see what else I want to show off here. I already talked about the surfaces and how I've been able to control their look for my surface layers. Be aware that those can be categorized or uncategorized. Yeah, I already talked about that. I talked about the enhance for roundabouts and the frames per second. Excellent. So that's pretty much a lot of the updates that have been available from InfraWorks. A lot of the changes have been really, other than the main interface change, a lot of the changes have happened in the background for us to be able to work with the software a lot more efficiently as I'm talking to Civil, talking to Revit, talking to Inventor, or talking up to the cloud and shooting this information up and syncing up to the cloud. So that's a lot of that information is in the background that has been updated. Other than the facelift that it completely got this overhaul, has this dark color scheme up here on the screen. The other option that, oh yes, the last option I want to talk about is connecting data sources. And one of the things that I like about here is I have the option to refresh a data source or re-import it. That's important here for the re-import. When I'm syncing data with Civil 3D, I've had problems where I change the model, I save the drawing, I come back and it still hasn't updated. There's the option to re-import. So it takes the data as it was, gets rid of it, and brings it in again. So in earlier releases, I had to take it, I had to delete it and bring it in again, or bring it in again and just get rid of the old one. So in this case, I have the ability of re-importing, not just refreshing. And that has a lot to do with all that civil information that I'm able to bring on over, or in some cases, drawings as well. But more importantly, Civil 3D, the alignments and the corridors and those terrains that I'm able to go back and reread that information from my source connections. So be aware that that is now available. And many of the updates have been really pretty much done in the background. A lot of wanting to really leverage databases, and I had seen that in the past that we had the ability to connect a data source, and that has been there for a while. Matter of fact, if you were looking at the limitation that InfraWorks has to just connect to 200 square kilometers, well, you're able to connect to a SQL database, which is a InfraWorks model, and start really pushing those limits of InfraWorks and trying to create much larger, robust models. And if you're really hitting that limit, I'm hoping you have an amazing stout of a machine and RAM and video card. But in this case, the big things in this release is the overall interface, the fact that I can connect to what I hadn't had Civil 3D for a while using this ArcGIS connector, and improvements with my BIM 360 to be able to share my model to the cloud via the BIM 360 service. So those are the big ticket items for the really 2020 release of the software. And if you're going to be using InfraWorks, you can just go out to the web, go into Autodesk.com, and they usually have from their main web page the latest release of the Autodesk software. Or if you do have the Autodesk desktop app already installed on your machine, you can see it inside of here, although I already have mine installed, so I'm not going to be able to see it. You'll be able to see the products that you have access to. So from here, you can launch and install it and update. However, you're not able to install multiple versions of InfraWorks if you don't already know this. Once you decide to move forward, you're going to have to get rid of the old one and install the new one. And if you happen to be using this in a team, be aware that once that model gets upgraded, it becomes that particular year release and version. So that was pretty much it here. I'm running here almost at the 45-minute marker, enough time to turn around and turn to Ms. Katana. I have not been keeping an eye on the questions, so I wanted to see what those look like or if you had any comments to add.
Yeah, thank you. First question that we have is, what date was the InfraWorks 2020.2 released?
2020 release was released earlier this year, and I think I have the actual date on my presentation. Let's see here. There it is. So early January, and even when things are released, have it be AutoCAD or InfraWorks. Sometimes I've seen one machine I typically just get it from the Autodesk desktop app, And I have one of my colleagues says, hey man, this has been released, and I'm looking at mine and it hasn't refreshed quite yet. So if you haven't seen it, it probably is you can go directly to the web and get it, or it may need to update your Autodesk desktop app. But it looks like it was released from my notes here in January.